I remember the exact moment I realized something had gone wrong. It was a Tuesday evening in November, the kind of evening where the house feels too quiet and the clock on the wall sounds almost cruel, ticking away the silence. I was sitting in my armchair by the window, the same chair where I used to read bedtime stories to my grandson Danny when he was 5 years old, and I was staring at my phone, waiting, just waiting. It had been 11 days since he'd called. Now, I know 11 days doesn't sound like a long time to some people. But when you're retired, when the kids have all grown and moved away, when the house that used to smell like birthday cake and crayon drawings now just smells like old furniture and quiet. 11 days feels like a lifetime. I picked up the phone 3 times that night, put it back down each time. I told myself he was busy. I told myself college was hard. I told myself I was being foolish, a little dramatic, maybe just lonely. But underneath all those excuses, there was something else sitting in my chest, something heavier, something I didn't want to name. The truth was, I had no idea why he stopped calling, and that was the part that hurt the most. I thought about everything I might have said wrong, every time I might have come across as too old-fashioned, too out of touch, too pushy. I went back through our last few conversations in my mind like a detective looking for clues, and I'm ashamed to admit I almost convinced myself that maybe I just wasn't that important to him anymore. If you're watching this right now, if you've ever sat alone in a quiet room, holding a phone that isn't ringing, waiting on a grandchild who seems to have quietly drifted away, I want you to know something. You are not alone, and this is not your fault, not entirely, not in the way you think. What I'm about to share with you today changed everything for me. It brought my grandson back into my life in a way I never expected, and I believe with everything I have that it can do the same for you. I know you've felt this too. Maybe it started slowly. A missed phone call here, a shorter text there. Maybe the Sunday dinners became monthly, then occasional, then just holidays. Maybe you notice that when you do get time with your grandchildren, they seem distracted, somewhere else, even when they're sitting right across the table from you. And the hardest part isn't the distance. The hardest part is not knowing why. I talked to a lot of grandparents after that November evening, friends from church, neighbors, people I'd bump into at the pharmacy or the grocery store. And I noticed something that surprised me. Nearly every single one of them had felt some version of what I was feeling. A grandfather in my Sunday school class told me his granddaughter used to call him every Sunday morning without fail. Then one year, those calls just stopped. Another woman I know, Eleanor, she raised 3 grandchildren practically on her own, and now she's lucky to get a birthday text. We don't talk about this enough. We smile and say, "Oh, they're just busy," and we wave it away like it doesn't sting. But it does sting, and pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone. I came across something once from the AARP research team. They found that loneliness among adults over 60 has reached levels that researchers are now calling a public health concern. And what struck me wasn't just the number of lonely seniors, it was why so many of them felt lonely. It wasn't that their families didn't love them. It was that the connection had quietly eroded, little by little, without anyone meaning for it to happen. That was me. That was my story. I didn't realize it then, but I was slowly losing Danny. Not because he stopped loving me, but because somewhere along the way the bridge between his world and mine had started to crumble, and I hadn't noticed until I was standing on the edge of it, looking across a gap I didn't know how to cross. And if I'm being completely honest with myself, I was part of the reason that gap was there. Let me tell you about the conversation that broke something open inside me. It was a few weeks after that quiet Tuesday evening. Danny finally called, not because I guilted him into it, but because his mother must have said something. And the call was fine, polite. He asked about my health. I asked about school. We talked about the weather like two strangers making small talk on an elevator. And when we hung up, I sat there feeling worse than I had when he wasn't calling at all, because I realized we weren't really talking. We were just checking a box. I called my daughter that same night, and I asked her something I'd never asked her before. I said, "Be honest with me. Does Danny feel like he can talk to me?" And there was a pause on the line, a long one. And then she said something I will never forget for the rest of my life. She said, "Dad, Danny loves you, but he's afraid you'll judge him." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just held the phone and let that settle into me like cold water, afraid I would judge him. My grandson, the little boy I taught to fish at the lake behind our old house, the one I carried on my shoulders at the 4th of July parade, the child I would have walked through fire for without blinking. He was afraid to talk to me. My daughter went on, gently, carefully, the way you talk to someone when you know the truth might bruise them. She told me that a few times when Danny had shared things with me, his interests, his ideas, things he cared about, I had responded in ways that made him feel small, not cruelly, not intentionally. But I had a habit, she said, of comparing things to how they used to be, of saying things like, "Well, in my day," or "That sounds like a waste of time," without realizing how those words landed on a 20-year-old who was just trying to share himself with his grandfather. I had been so focused on how much I missed him that I never stopped to ask myself, was I a safe place for him? A child psychologist named Dr. Kenneth Ginsburg wrote something I stumbled across afterward that stopped me completely in my tracks. He said that young people don't pull away from the elders in their lives because they don't love them. They pull away when they don't feel genuinely seen, heard, or accepted. They pull away when connection starts to feel like performance. And somewhere, without knowing it, I had made our relationship feel like a performance. That night, I sat alone and cried, not out of self-pity, but out of something harder, the grief of realizing how much time I might have wasted and the fierce, stubborn hope that it wasn't too late to change. What happened next changed everything for me. I didn't call Danny and make a grand speech. I didn't sit him down for a serious talk or write him a long letter about my feelings. I did something much simpler. And honestly, something that felt uncomfortable at first because it required me to let go of something I'd been holding on to for a very long time. The idea that because I was older, I was supposed to be the teacher. I asked Danny to teach me something. He was really into something at the time. Video games, of all things. The kind I didn't understand at all, with characters and storylines and strategies that meant nothing to me. In the past, I would have smiled politely and changed the subject. But this time, I called him and I said, "Danny, I want to understand what you're into. Would you show me?" You should have heard the change in his voice. It was like a window opening in a room that had been shut up too long. He started explaining things to me. Slowly at first, like he wasn't sure I was serious, and I asked questions, real questions, not polite ones. I let myself be genuinely curious. I let myself be the student. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, we talked for over an hour, and neither one of us wanted to hang up. I learned something important in those weeks and months that followed. Connection with grandchildren isn't built by being the wise elder who has all the answers. It's built by being the one person in their life who is genuinely, endlessly interested in who they are becoming, not who you want them to be, who they actually are. I also had to do some honest work on myself. I had to notice the moments when a judgment was rising up in me and make a conscious choice to set it down. Not every hill is worth dying on. Not every difference in values or lifestyle needs to become a lesson. Sometimes love just means listening. I read about something called the curiosity approach that family therapists often recommend for rebuilding intergenerational bonds. The idea being that when older adults approach younger generations with genuine curiosity rather than advice, the younger generation becomes far more open to returning that curiosity. And eventually, they start asking for wisdom naturally without being pushed. That's what happened with Danny. Once I stopped trying to pour wisdom into him, he started coming to me asking for it, on his own, in his own time, because he finally felt safe enough to do so. The phone calls came back, slowly at first, then regularly. Then one evening he called me just to talk. No reason, no agenda. And that night I sat in my armchair by that same window, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt needed, and I felt connected. I want to speak to you directly now, just you and me. If you're watching this and your heart has been heavy, if there's a grandchild somewhere out there who has gone quiet, who feels like a stranger at the holiday table, who looks at their phone more than they look at you, I want you to hear this, and I want you to really let it in. They have not stopped loving you. The distance you feel is not the end of the story. It is an invitation to ask yourself, not what they're doing wrong, but what kind of space you're creating for them to be fully themselves around you. It's one of the most important questions I've ever asked myself, and it came almost too late. You have something no one else in that child's life can give them. You have time, you have patience, you have a kind of love that doesn't have an agenda, that doesn't need them to succeed or perform or become anything in particular. You just want them close. And if you can let them feel that, purely without conditions, they will come back to you. I promise you that. I think about all the years I spent being the grandfather with wisdom to share, when what Danny actually needed was a grandfather who was willing to sit in the student's chair for a while. And now, at this stage of my life, I can say without any hesitation, those hours I spent learning about things I didn't understand just because he loved them are among the most precious hours of my life. Last spring, Danny came to visit for a weekend, just him and me. We sat out on the back porch in the late afternoon, the way I used to sit with my own grandfather when I was a boy, and we talked for hours about his future, about his fears, about life and love, and the things that keep you up at night. He asked me questions I never thought he'd ask. He wanted to know how I got through hard times. He wanted to know what I regretted. He wanted to know what made life feel worth it. And I realized He had needed me all along. He just needed me to become someone he could come to. Don't give up. Don't let another 11 days pass into silence and tell yourself it doesn't matter. Pick up the phone, not to be needed, not to teach, not to remind them who you are, but just to ask them one simple question. Ask them what they're excited about right now, and then listen, really listen, like their answer is the most interesting thing you've heard in years. Because here's what I know now, after everything, after the quiet Tuesdays and the long pauses and the tears and the breakthroughs and that long afternoon on the back porch, the greatest gift a grandparent can give is not wisdom. It is presence. It is the kind of love that says, no matter who you are becoming, no matter how different your world looks from mine, there is always a seat at my table, a place in my heart, and someone here who is so proud of you, it's almost more than I can hold. That's what I want for you. That kind of closeness, that kind of grace. And I believe with everything I am that it is still possible for you. Don't you dare give up.